Hi there, it's Carl Irwin, the Common Magician, and I've got something interesting to talk with you about today. It's actually a concept that I've had floating around in my head since the last video that I did yesterday evening. Something I said that just kind of echoed around in there, and I thought more about it. And I think this video is going to be me saying things that people think but they don't say out loud, right? So it's going to be kind of a philosophical rant, a little bit of a ramble here, which, hey, we haven't had one of those in a while. So if you're looking for a trick and a method and you want to get out of here, first of all, this isn't the channel for you anyway, and you should know that by now. But if you're looking to get a routine out of this, I don't think you're going to get one, but you will get maybe some philosophical insight on a whole category of magic and the pros and cons of it. So this is what I want to try, though, first, just as a setup. I'm thinking of a card. I have a card in my mind. I need a number. Give me a number. Okay, so you can give me kind of a random number. Let's say you've got 24. 24 is your number. So the card that I'm thinking of is actually the 4 of spades. It's the card I'm thinking of, 4 of spades. Okay, you gave me 24. Now you could go with 42 as well, right? But we'll take 24, at least in this sense. The idea is that you would speak a number to me. I'm thinking of the 4 of spades. I just want to see something. I've got a shuffled deck here, and we're going to check the 24th card. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. 4 of spades is what I said. 4 of spades is the card. So this is the trick, and this is actually a trick that was mentioned 2 videos ago, and I mentioned this very possibility for the trick. It's just a card number, and it was grouped up with a bunch of other tricks because as an idea, I don't think this stands well enough by itself to devote a lot of time to on here. But I gave a couple of ideas for it. The reason why it doesn't, I think, deserve a lot of time on here is because the methods are so vast, but this is one of them. And for a magician, when there's a vast number of methods, it may not be the strongest trick to us. However, to the spectator, a real spectator, what some magicians, I think, derogatorily describe as the lay spectator. I really don't like that term. I've talked a lot about why I don't like that term. I'll cover it real quick for you. If a magician does a trick for you as a magician, and they use a method and an approach that you don't know, you are a lay spectator. You have to be, by the definition, because all of the vocabulary, methodology, and approach that you know doesn't apply in that instance. And if you are fooled by it, then you are a lay spectator. So this term is so fluid, it's nonsense. Lay spectators are nearly 100% of all people, including magicians. On the other hand, right, lay spectators, when you're talking about common methods that most magicians know, the vast majority of us know, you're still looking at 99.999999999% of people, because our group is really, really tiny, okay? And that gets you into doing tricks for magicians all the time, and that's a whole other subject. But it's kind of a weak trick for discussion's sake, right? But for a spectator, any spectator, right, unknowing of the method, that's a really powerful trick, right? Shuffle deck, name a number, I'm thinking of a card, there it is, and I call it ahead of time. So obviously this is operating, I think most magicians would say this trick is operating off of one particular method, and the method is a memorized deck, right? A memorized or a stacked deck. In this case, it would be a memorized deck. There's a difference between the two that we're not going to get into. But just thinking about the memorized deck, there's a lot of discussion about memorized deck work. And I think it's kind of dying down a little bit. There was a time, maybe up to about 10 years ago, where it just really exploded. And there was so much discussion about it. And all of the really hipster, magic channels you'd find on YouTube and products that you'd see online were about pursuing mnemonica. Right? Not only is memdeck work great, and you should be doing it, and if you're not doing it, there's something wrong with you, you should be using this particular stack. It was kind of a fad thing. This is not at all to disparage any of Juan Tamarice's work, right? It's all fantastic work, and I think to say that not being aware of it and making a choice to do it or not do it is unfortunate. You should be aware, I think, that this exists and what it can do, and then choose to do it or not. I think that's where I kind of stand. But let's talk about the choice not to do it, right? Again, that statement, if you're not doing memorized deck work, you should be. Or the question could be, why in the world are you not doing memorized deck work? Why are you not doing it? And then there's an implication to the question, why not? It's a stepping stone to get to the next thing, which is a presumption about why people aren't doing memorized deck work. It's hard for you, isn't it? Oh, it's really hard to memorize a stack. I know you've worked so hard at it, and you spent weeks on it, and you just couldn't get it down. So I can teach you, though, a way to memorize the stack and make it much more easy for you so that you too can be doing this kind of magic that you should be doing, because again, why aren't you doing it, right? That's how it comes off. And I think in a way I think at an innocent level, that is what is intended by those remarks, right? It's not intended to be disparaging in any way, I don't know, dismissive of those people that don't do it, or classist of those that do it and those that don't. I don't think that's overtly the intention, but I think it is the underlying tone there, right? Now, what I want to talk about is that there actually are reasons not to do stack work. There are reasons not to do it at all. By the way, if you are having a hard time doing stack work, I sell a memorized stack, and you can get it at Penguin, and it looks like that. It's very easy to remember. It's the one that I use. You can learn it very quickly. I still say that I think this is the easiest memorized stack to learn that there is, and I think that it's easiest to recall, and I think that it looks completely fair upon examination. And yeah, that's it. So, but I don't want you to think that I view this as being a higher level of magic. You don't have to do this at all. At all. It's not important. Okay. So let's get to this other side of it. Why not do mem work? Why not do it at all? Why avoid it completely? So the argument for it is that you can do almost anything. And that's one of the statements I made on a recent video, is that, well, you could just stack everything. You could just stack everything and then it would work, right? And then all you have to have is a false shuffle, and that kind of rubs up against the issue, right? You can do anything. You can do the most amazing magic, and you can do routine upon routine and go on for hours and hours with a stack that is memorized. That's why you might choose to do that. But why not choose to do it? Okay, here's number one. This is the statement that I made. I said you could do this with a stack, and then all you would need is a false shuffle. And that statement that I said, as soon as I said it, just kind of ponged around up there, and I thought about it for a moment, and then I realized that, and I've thought this before, and this is truly the reason why people avoid it. Imagine if this was a site, a channel devoted to memorized magic, memorized stack magic, card magic only, memorized deck. Okay, various types of memorized stacks, not just one in particular, but just that. Imagine if that's what this was. You would get really sick of it, because I know you would, because you would already understand mechanically what this is about. The appreciation, whatever appreciation is there, would really mostly be about, well, the stack can work that way. Mathematically or organizationally, these things happen to work out. And here's a new idea that this stack can accomplish, right? And that's kind of how stack decks work, like Sidestep and some of the cyclical mathematical ones. They do a lot of these. Here's a trick you can do with this stack because of the properties of the stack. But any kind of memorized stack has those things, right? That would be where the appreciation begins and ends, is, I found something new, or I'm showing you something new that this memorized stack or this stack can do. Otherwise, mechanically, it is erroneous, I think, to say that the one method at work is the stack. I think that's entirely untrue, and I think that magicians have kind of gone astray in saying such a thing and in thinking such a thing, because the reality is that the one method that's actually at work is a false shuffle. It's a false shuffle, right? Like I said, all you would need is a false shuffle. Well, doesn't that just pretty much describe all memorized and stack work? Pretty much. I mean, there's some other organizational things in the way that cards have to be dealt and piles that have to be made to make certain things work, and other philosophy about breaking the stack part by part and that kind of stuff too. I understand that. But ultimately, the one method at work isn't the stack. The one method at work really is the false shuffle, because it's essential. You cannot do stacked work or memorized work without a false shuffle. And it has to be good false shuffling. It has to be properly placed false shuffling. It doesn't have to be burnable false shuffling, but it does have to be justified and well placed. And it has to be remembered. People have to remember that the deck was shuffled, right? If you're not going to do that, then you have to go into another area, which a lot of people don't really want to. It's nice to talk about, but very few people really enjoy deck switches. Very few people really enjoy the practicality of doing that. And that is to say that, go ahead, shuffle, this up all you want, take the deck back, and then you get a switch in there, and then you work with the stack going thereafter. And in that case, the one method at work isn't the stack, it's the switch, right? The stack is really just a self-working attribute to the trick. And that's a method, but it's not really a method at work, I think, right? Because you have to have the switch or you have to have the false shuffle. You really have to have those. They're required because of the presence of the stack. So why not do any stacked work at all? Well, because your magic really does become, I think, boiled down to false shuffling. It just comes down to that. This would be a channel. If we devoted all of our time to that, it really would turn into a channel about false shuffling. I would teach you one, and I would say that's sufficient enough, and that would be it. Or I would have a channel where I would teach you one false shuffle, then another one, 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 and we just keep finding new false shuffles here and there. And it really would be to no point, because you only need the first one. You only need one false shuffle that's properly placed and is effective. So why not do it? Why not do stacked work? Well, because the magic turns into just a false shuffle. All of it, pretty much. Okay. A second reason why not do stacked deck work, and this is so that if you're ever running into those people that say, I don't do stacked deck work, don't look down upon them, because they may actually be thinking above you. They might be thinking up here above you. They might have already considered these things, and they're saying, I'm not going to pigeonhole into that, right? I think of Harry Lorraine, the late, great Harry Lorraine, who did not, there's some stuff that he's done with prepared decks and stack work, but up until very recent years, his mantra was, I always work with someone else's deck. Now, for most people like you and me, how often do we run into people that have decks of cards? Well, for Harry Lorraine, he's always at a magic convention around magicians and people that have cards. There's always going to be cards. And he'd take someone else's deck and he would do his magic. And he has volumes upon volumes upon volumes upon volumes devoted to just impromptu magic with a deck of cards. And to say that he doesn't have enough magic because of the limitation of an impromptu deck is insanity. Right? The number of effects that the man generated and tweaked and transformed, content from other people is just so vast you couldn't learn it all. I mean, you could, but why? Right? You don't need to. So much more magic there than I think, you could really cram into a memorized deck just from a borrowed deck of cards. And the power in that is that it actually isn't a one-trick pony in terms of methodology. It doesn't depend on one thing in particular, which in this case is not the stack, but the false shuffle. You can use a false shuffle when it is required, and when it is required with a borrowed deck, most of the time it only has to be a partial false shuffle. You're just retaining a part of something. You have a great deal of freedom whenever you're working with a borrowed deck in use or a partially prepared deck of cards. Or you're doing a memorized deck trick, and then after you're done with that one trick at the onset or two, you move on to a vast array If you're doing a show, a presentation, a walk around, you move into a vast array of other tricks that don't depend on that thing, right? So the question, why aren't you doing memorized deck work? Why aren't you doing stacked deck work? I think that question really needs to appropriately be placed into a very tight little corner over here. And the question should be, why aren't you learning some stacked deck magic? Why aren't you learning some memorized deck magic? Why not? Because there are some really, really strong effects that you can't do with a borrowed deck and shuffled deck in use, a borrowed deck, that you can do with this. And it's worth it maybe to learn them because of the tricks, not because of the status, right? And that is to say, you don't have to convert entirely to that kind of magic, but maybe it's worth learning a couple of really good approaches using a memorized deck because of the power of it. And you only need to use a false shuffle. And if you have an array of other tricks that work with a shuffled deck in use, you can then move on to those methods from there. So not really to cancel any side of this, but just to think more openly and say some of the things that maybe you were thinking or you thought before, and articulate them openly for you to consider. So what is stacked work? What is memorized deck work? It's a false shuffle, or it's a switch. It's one of those two kinds of things. And when you really boil it down, you have to have that kind of element to it to make it work. Why not do it? Because of that, because that's really what it is. And to just kind of pigeonhole oneself into that kind of magic all the time really boils down your magic to just those sorts of approaches and methods, which is not only limiting in terms of the perspective of the magic at a subconscious level, it's also limiting in terms of oneself. It can be unrewarding, right, to just kind of be doing the same thing all the time, rather than maybe pick up on a few other very accessible methods like we talk about on this channel, very accessible things that one can do to do a wide variety of other types of tricks using a deck that can be shuffled up. So anyway, that's the other side of it that maybe you've thought but you haven't said before. Good luck with that. Put your comments in the comment section below, any ideas or thoughts that you have on this conversation. Good luck with that. Happy magicking.